Man, that guy's awesome.
We have to have him. I don't know how
Yeah.
we bring him on live. We're probably going to have to talk with the Jim Henson Studios to get the Muppet in.
Yeah.
You need a Muppet. Unbelievable. So, welcome, listeners, to the BBQ Nerds Podcast. I am Dave, the real meat stick, and tonight's focus is going to be on barbecue fuel, wood and charcoal. So, tonight's episode is sponsored by Smokeslinger. You can get your quote at www.smokeslinger.com. Take a look at the full-size Smokeslinger, the mini Smokeslinger, and the all-new Liberty 94 offset smoker. With that said, welcome back. Welcome to where smoke meets science and meat meets magic. And with me, as always, is my co-host, the one and only Frank Cox, smoker builder, the smoker guru, the smoker engineer. Here he is, live and direct.
Hey, right on. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Yeah, ready for another great evening of having a few drinks and talking about barbecue. And tonight, what are we talking about tonight? Wood and charcoal.
That's right. Wood and charcoal, the most necessary fuels that we need in order to have ourselves a delicious barbecue, low and slow, hot and fast, whatever method that you use, you got to have fuel for that fire.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been cooking with wood and charcoal now for a very long time. Actually paying attention to it since about '07, but I've been cooking since I was probably 19 in one way or another. Matter of fact, earlier than that, I guess, because my mom used to always do the hot dog roasts, and we'd walk around and grab all the sticks and whatever, and who knows what it was, but we was burning it and we was having hot dogs. So I guess that's how long I've been cooking on fire. How about you?
Oh, I've been on fire. Wow. Does that count gas? Does that count natural gas and propane?
Well, wood and charcoal tonight,
Okay,
maybe.
wood and charcoal, that'll probably put me into probably 10 to 12 years old, preteen.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we never really paid attention to like what wood we were cooking with when we were younger. I know we had an array of trees. We had maple trees. We had, I don't know which breed of maple trees. I think there were sugar maples, but there's a bunch of different kinds. We had a lot of oaks. We did have a couple sassafras trees, which we should talk about that tonight a little bit too. We had red bud trees. I mean, we cooked on whatever limbs hit the ground when we was kids. They became hot dog fire, which, that's something to think about is what woods, something else to talk about tonight is what woods do people ask questions about? Like, can I cook with? And what would the impact be as well?
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, so what do you like the most right now? What are your favorite wood types personally?
I got to say that, bringing it back to when I lived in New York City, it was kind of frowned upon if you just decided to start lighting sticks on fire. It's not that as a kid you didn't burn things, or if you went to camp, obviously you burn things there. If you're a Boy Scout, you did that as well. But outside of that, they weren't really a fan of us lighting fires unless there was a designated area. And typically that would have been charcoal that we used. I don't remember supplementing any wood in at that point. Now that where I live currently, I have a tremendous amount of white oak and red oak. You mentioned sassafras, that's out here. We've got cherry wood, apple wood, black cherry, which you introduced me to. My wood guy happened to have a good stock of that, so I got a hold of it. And if I want to spend a little extra money, then I'll go to a big box store. And I'm not saying I'm cheating here, but B&B does happen to have post oak. They've got mesquite. They've got pecan. So fortunately, a lot of the brands out there that make charcoal have also gone over to selling wood chunks and wood splits for the rest of us that aren't so fortunate to have some of these other exotic woods that we hear our influencers and other people talk about, like in Central Texas or in Tennessee.
Yeah. So as far as where I'm at, we've got on the property here on my little spread, I've got 4 different species of oak, 3 different species of hickory. Um, I have seen some cherry trees here on the place, but they're not big enough to actually use. I've been getting it from other people. Neighbor has a maple tree that's on its way, a sugar maple. But we've in the Midwest here in Missouri, we've got a lot of stuff available within arm's reach. Fortunately, things I have that don't grow here are like I've got a little stash of mesquite out there that Aaron brought back with him from Arizona a while back. But primarily, I'm using some kind of black cherry, wild black cherry, or I've got an array of post oak. There's other breeds I always forget about, shingle oaks, which are kind of like in that post oak family a little bit. Uh, White oak, red oak. What's the other one? There's another one. Post oak, red oak, blackjack oak. Golly, we got a lot of different ones. I forget how many we got, but we can go out and hit trees all day long out there.
So when I first heard about post oak, and obviously, it came up because of Central Texas barbecue. I went looking for this stuff. I didn't know any different. I heard post oak, and what came to me was that it was what's used for fence posting. I learned the hard way that you cannot just take a fence post and burn it. That's pressure treated wood. It's chemically treated. Yeah. It doesn't burn the same way. When the deck on the back of my house was destroyed, it was made of teak when some trees fell on it. I found out that teak burns very well. It's also very expensive, but it was, that was it. Yeah. It was done. I don't recall what the flavor was on it. Because after being on the back of the house as long as it was, there was no more stain. There was nothing. I mean, that was it. It was just, at that point, it was just raw wood that got ripped off the back of the house.
Yeah.
But I guess, when you had mentioned earlier about different type of woods and things like that, you brought up like sassafras. I've had people by me tell me that, hey, you should try that sassafras as a sweet flavor. But then I hear other stories that if you use too much of it, and I don't know if it's the wood or there's something that's in the root, you have to be careful. It could get you quite sick.
Yeah. It's an S word, and it was on the tip of my tongue until you brought it up. Now I forgot it, so I got to Google it. But there is a chemical that's in sassafras that, and they're not really talking to the barbecue guys when they say it could poison you or get you sick. They're primarily talking to people that make sassafras tea. Or it smells like root beer. If you ever had a sassafras log or some bark or something that you tried to smell, it has that sarsaparilla kind of, root beer like smell. I wish I could remember the name. It's not Soren, but it's something like that. It's somebody in the comments after this is done will tell me. But that chemical, like if you drink a lot of sassafras tea, which is made from the root of the thing, can become toxic in certain quantities. And Jonathan down here just brought up fillet, which is made from the leaves of the sassafras tree. For what I understand, that's a fillet powder, like a fillet gumbo. It's a thickening agent. I have some in the cabinet up there for when we make it, But yeah, so as far as my favorite out of everything I've got out here at the place, I'll take cherry and hickory blend all day long for anything. That's just kind of my go-to. I do like a oak and mesquite blend as well. But out of all the oaks, I believe that it's a really strong toss-up for me between post oak and another one called blackjack oak. There's 2 different oaks that's got black in it. Black oak, which is just your standard, it looks kind of like a red oak, whatever. Big tree, they're everywhere. But blackjack oak is a thin, scrubby, really weird branched, coarse bark that it burns super hot and shoots sparks is what it does, as opposed to post oak, which burns super hot and doesn't spark as much. So that's the main difference. But yeah, those 2 I like a lot.
I think that getting back to that sassafras, I think Hojo Barbecue just nailed it. It's saffron oil, which I've seen out in Lancaster County, where we have the Amish, they make their own root beer from scratch. And that happens to be one of the items that's in that mason jar when you pick it up from them.
Oh, the saffron oil. Yeah,
Saffron oil.
that's the thing that in the wrong quantities can hurt you. So, yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah. So as far as that goes, do you have you cooked with other kinds of oak besides post oak, or what do you have around you that's easy to get? White oak?
Here in northeastern Pennsylvania, there's a tremendous amount of red oak and white oak, and it's relatively inexpensive, predominantly because of the amount of trees that continuously fall down. We just don't have a good root system. So
Yeah.
there's so many wood guys that get a hold of this. And most people, when the wood guy's chopping it up, are using it for heating the house. But there is, and I don't know if it's true, but there's a small population of people that will allow the wood to dry out naturally rather than kiln dried. And they clean it up, they get the bark off, and they call it food grade wood. I don't know what makes it a food grade wood, but it's obviously a line of a line. Let's just say that it's a lot of
That's
BS.
cool.
However, that tends to be the heating source for the pits, and then I'll supplement in for flavor either applewood or cherry wood or something else, because buying all that store-bought wood, it's very expensive. To try to equal up to a quarter of a cord or half a cord, I would spend a fortune.
Yeah. So getting into the flavor a little bit of some of these woods, which we'll cover in a lot more detail later on, but just to kind of give you an idea where we're at on the flavor spectrum. So when we get into fruit woods like apple, cherry, peach, things like that, they tend to have a sweeter, more pleasant flavor or smell to them. And then you get into things like hickory, mesquite, woods like that have a stronger, smokier flavor. And a lot of people say you have to blend it with something. Then we get into oak, which is just a good general run of the mill, middle of the road. It's in between super sweet and super strong smoke flavor. If you dry it properly, though, I think you can kind of mild out that harder smoke flavor, that kind of thing. But now, as far as woods I would never use is like walnut. That's one I would never use. Although I've heard people talk about in the nut woods, you get into there. Walnut is one of those. Grapevine. Have you ever had anything cooked with grapevines?
No.
You want to talk about like just syrup, I mean, it's
really,
oh yeah, it's super stout. They have a few wineries around here that try to do wood-fired pizza with grape wood from the old dead vines, but yeah, so the nut woods, I would stay away personally from like walnut. Somebody brought up pine a moment ago, which I was going to talk about that later on. Pine's a no-go. Cedar, stuff like that. Cedar planks, now you're grilling, that's a much hotter flavor. It's a much hotter fire, so you're going to get less of that cedar flavor. It's popular for fish, but I've never really been into that personally. So, but hey,
cedar
tell me about your
cedar planks are great with salmon. I've had that many a time. It does pair very well with fish.
Yeah. But sticking that in your firebox, I'm not really sure it would be a good thing.
No, when I think of cedar, like the first thing that comes to mind is this cedar lining in my humidor, and it's great for the humidity and keeping the temperature and all. But I don't know if I'd want necessarily cigar smoked wood to then go into my smoker. It seems like a double smoking crime.
Yeah, I guess so. Hey, so tell me about your charcoal experience there.
Oh my goodness. So, for a long time, I was a big fan of just straight up lump charcoal. And well, before that, there were the briquettes, never that match light stuff, nothing that
Mhm.
has the chemicals in it that just lights itself up. So I evolved from going with just standard lump charcoal to start to play with these char logs. Like B&B has the char logs, Blue Hogs has the char logs. Great stuff, super hot, very convenient to be able to move around. I love this stuff. From
Mhm.
there, I was interested in other types of charcoal. So I invested a small amount of money in this. I think it's called Binchan. It's what they
Yeah.
use in Japan for the yakitori. It's what they use in Korea for their Korean barbecue. And then I started transitioning into other types like the
Mhm.
eucalyptus and bamboo. And I've been on a tear of different type of charcoals, not only for flavor, but also for heat, for the amount of time that it's able to burn without having to refill it. So it's been an ongoing
Mhm.
theoretical experiment of whether lump charcoal versus powder that's stamped together to make a log to just
Mhm.
other varietals of wood that becomes charcoal. What's the best?
Yeah.
And so far, my favorite one really is these char logs.
Yeah, those things burn really good and hot. Pardon me just 1 second. I'm looking up a website that I always have trouble finding. I found it. Okay. I'm gonna bring it up here in a little bit.
Sure.
Um,
The other one I started
mhm.
playing with was from Jealous Devil. Now, I love Jealous Devil stuff. They have something that has a hex shape to it, and they also
Mhm.
have a pinch on. So I played with both of their products, and I'll tell you, for dollar, they're a great product. It burns long. It burns
Mhm.
very hot. And if you're going to experiment with that Binchan, I would suggest you go with the Jealous Devil before you start spending $300 on a couple of pounds of charcoal that's imported from Japan because
Mhm.
you're a nut like me and need to know what it tastes like.
What is that charcoal made from? Is it some kinda tree over there in Japan?
It,
Or
I think it's also made of bamboo wood because bamboo is so readily available. I
okay.
should, you know, I need to go back, take a look at it.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the box is written in Japanese. So I'm
Yeah.
going to need to take my Android phone and take a picture and let it do the translation for me.
Yeah, Google Lens. Yeah.
Yeah, the Google Lens.
So it's funny, I didn't know that Jealous Devil made that. They have also Binkatan, in their lump, which is axe wood is what they call it in, South America. That wood is super, super, super hard, and that's what's in their XL chunks, which I really, really like that charcoal. As far as my experience with charcoal, I started out, of course, with the thing that you can get at every Academy, Lowe's, Harbor Freight, which is Kingford or
Yeah.
Kingsford, and use that getting started. And then, of course, we mixed in a little bit of Always Save here and there. And then I got my barbecue salvation going, and we started awakening to this thing called lump charcoal. And so I started looking at different brands and things like that. And at the time, there was a company we had just started competing, and there was a company out in Kansas called Frontier, and at that time, they were still a family-owned operation in, eastern Kansas, southeastern Kansas, and they were using a lot of pecan wood in their charcoal, and that's when I was like the light bulb came on for me, was when I started getting that we got sponsored by them for a little while, and that charcoal had a pecan odor to it a little bit, you
Mm.
could smell it, and I was like, "Man, this is really great. Why don't they do this with other hardwoods and make like specific like hickory charcoal and stuff like that?" And but then, the more we started cooking with it and all of that, it all just kind of started to lump charcoal. It was kind of lump charcoal except for size and where it was made and the temperature and stuff like that. So I started doing a little bit of research and I found this website. I'm going to put it in the this is how you know somebody's an old school barbecue guy. It's in if you go back and look at the live chat on YouTube and Facebook, I just posted a link from a website called, don't freak out, but it's called nakedwiz.com. The guy is just an old barbecue guy that started this blog back in the early days, and I've really enjoyed my time hanging out on that website. But he reviews charcoal. It's called the Internet's Lump Charcoal Database. And what he does is he goes out and gets charcoal, usually 2 bags of each kind. And he has tried charcoal I've never even heard of. And he has a very scientific process that he goes through to both rate and grade and give information about these charcoals. The reason I bring him up is because I also learned how to make my own charcoal kiln on this website out of 55-gallon drum and a 30-gallon drum. And I did that when my boy Joe was probably like 6 or something like that. We made that drum real quick, that thing, and went out here and cut up a bunch of oak and split it up into little, quarter pieces and shoved it all in the barrel and made our first batch of charcoal. And man, was it cool. That was a good experience. So that's when I really started to learn a little bit of, about lump charcoal and such like that. At that point, I turned my back completely on briquettes or any manufactured like briquette style charcoal. I was all the way lump, and tried a lot of different kinds. Then I found out that here in Missouri, there's within 30 miles of my house, there's basically every brand except B&B has a plant around my house here. And usually they're about 30 miles away. Some of these guys manufacture and private label for a lot of different brands. For instance, Timber Charcoal is one brand. That guy actually manufactures for a lot of people, and I've went down and bought from the plant. It's pretty cool, man, when you can actually see it being made in a commercial application. Kingsford, I also had to work up there on a few things up in Vienna, Bell, Missouri, up here. That's where one of their briquette plants is. So that's pretty cool. Overall, I've tried what we talked about a second ago, the Binkatan. I've tried regular traditional lump charcoal that's made here in the U.S., in the Midwest mostly. I've had coconut charcoal. I don't know if you ever tried that. It's made out of the coconut shells. It's a renewable thing, they say. And then I've tried the good charcoal, which is from Africa, which is the acacia bush. That was pretty interesting. That charcoal is really good. And of course, char logs and stuff like that. I think out of all of it, I still like a good old lump charcoal. Out of all of it, I like just a good lump charcoal the best. Yeah. I don't know. That website's, huh?
Walmart's been having some amazing deals on that good charcoal that you mentioned that comes in from Africa. I think that they're 30-pound bags, and they may be the only ones that carry that at that size. I've seen bags that go anywhere from 17.6 pounds to 20-pound bags, but a 30-pound bag of charcoal is an amazing deal. That's something that Walmart, Sam's Club that's carrying.
Yeah, I think I've seen it in Target also. Is another place I've seen it. But I talked to that guy that owns that at the Royal. Actually, I visited with him for a little bit, and he had these little stuffed animal cheetahs all over like some kind of mascot thing. And I asked him, what's with the cheetahs? I don't get it. And evidently, because he's from the UK is where he's from. And evidently there's something going on in Africa, South Africa, where that acacia bush is out of control, like it's an invasive species of some kind. It's got this really long thorn on it. And so their thing about the cheetahs is that the cheetahs run through these bushes and the thorn pokes their eyes out.
Wow.
And they go blind. And so that's why their cause with this charcoal is to do something to kill all them bushes and get rid of the thorns, because when the cheetah goes blind, he can't hunt, and then he dies, and la la la. So I just thought that was an interesting thing. It didn't like necessarily start from barbecue, as far as I can tell. It started from, save the cheetahs. So, but then I saw a new charcoal come out, same thing, same brand, same bush, called Harder,
Hmm.
the Harder charcoal or something. It's an orange bag. That stuff burns great though, the acacia bush charcoal. Have you ever tried it yourself?
I haven't.
Mhm.
And the reason why it came to mind is I was recently in Sam's Club and I was like, I should grab this. I really should take this.
Mhm.
But I never
Yeah.
came back down the aisle to to stick it in the cart.
Yeah. So as far as if I had to pick one over the other, I'm gonna pick lump all day long,
Oh
I
yeah.
think. Yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts on that? What would you pick? What would be your go-to by a pallet?
Lump by pallet. Now you're talking. If anybody wants to send me a pallet of charcoal, I'm open to that.
Let's
Please.
roll.
Yeah,
I'll
I
use
can
whatever.
certainly use Frank and I'll split it. I can definitely use some more charcoal. So from the standpoint of lump charcoal, that has always been the go-to. The reason why I'm on this kick now with these char logs is they're just easier to be able to put into let's say into my charcoal pans that I'm using in my smoke slinger.
Mhm.
So that's why I've been a fan of them. However, to just look at lump charcoal, one of the reasons why I've gone through so many brands with that is that I find all these like things that are in there that I don't think should be in there. There's
Okay.
sometimes rocks, and sometimes like there's nails and things. I don't know when they're scooping it up off the ground if there's some other type of waste and they, as they're picking it up, they don't really, run it through a metal detector. But at the end of my cook, sometimes I'm looking inside, say, the Liberty 94 in the cook chamber, and I use the charcoal to get my coal bed going. When I'm done with my cook, there's sometimes some surprise items in there. It's like
Mhm.
it's like opening up a Cracker Jack box and you get this secret prize. So
We used to save, speaking of that, we used to save all the stuff in a jar, that we found in the charcoal thing. But I'll tell you how it happens. So they use front end loaders to get the charcoal out of the kiln. So when we
yes,
say charcoal kiln for lump charcoal, it's typically like a concrete hut that's like a domed roof is what it's like. And it's
uh-huh,
lined with this stuff called refractory. And the refractory is like a fireproofing compound that they just plaster on the inside. And then they got to keep repairing it over and over and over to keep it airtight. Because at a certain point, on these old kilns, at a certain point, they wind up closing it off to atmosphere so it'll smolder itself out without burning. Right
right,
now, what happens is in the floor of these things you've had, so they take, for instance, timber or royal oak or whoever it is, they take the slabs off of, for instance, there's a barrel making plant here for making whiskey barrels, and they use all the white oak and they make staves out of it. Well, whenever they cut that up, there's so much of that log that they can't use, so that's the slab that comes off the sides, usually got bark on it. So they'll take those slabs and they'll stack them on pallets and band them down. And then they take that and it's on a pallet.
hmm
So they'll take that entire pallet and push it back inside that kiln. And then they'll just stack them in there as tight as they can get them in that kiln. And then where there's any air gaps, they'll break one down and they'll start throwing more pieces up in to block it completely full. Because as it burns and makes the charcoal, it starts to settle inside the kiln, and they just want to make sure they minimize how much airspace is in there. So the nails, the rocks, the stuff like that is because of like the how they palletize it. I've even seen pieces that clearly were part of a pallet,
hmm
but the pallet is white oak, so who cares? White oak or some kind of oak, and they just burn that along with the charcoal. So yeah, you'll get nails here and there, whatever. But when they scoop all this charcoal out of that kiln, it's all different sizes, big chunks and powder and stuff like that. And they take it in by the loader full and put it on the ground inside the facility, big concrete floor. And they use this floor and they classify out all the different sizes. And each bag should be so many percent this size, so many percent this size, so many percent that size of charcoal. Then they take all of the powder and the fines and they actually, I don't know that they all do, but a lot of them sell it for medical use or charcoal filters for like water systems and stuff. So, but the nails and all of that stuff, once they get this stuff classified, it's scoop shovels. And so they just shovel whatever in the bag. They're not going to pick it all out, you know? So that's interesting how that's how I found out where it comes from, you know?
I've always been fascinated, but you bring up how there should be a certain percentage of this size and that size. I've always been fascinated when I open up a bag, and sometimes there's a piece of wood that looks like it should have weighed 5 or 6 pounds. Now it weighs like a few ounces because there's no water in it, and it's not as dense as it used to be. And then you have like these little pieces that if you put them on a charcoal grate, they fall right through. So was the rationale behind this when they started to actually sort it out into universal sizes, what they call their competition blend, or they call their gold label? So for example, you look at Fogo charcoal. Fogo has a black bag, and then they have their super premium gold bag. The gold bag, they seem to be a universal size. Or you look at like the Kamado Joe or the Big Green Egg, and they have their extra large jumbo size pieces. So each brand, I'm talking our premium brands here, tend to have sizes where it's almost like somebody went through and said, all right, everything that was like a 5-pound piece that now weighs a couple ounces, we can sell this bag for $50 because we know there's a guy like Dave out there who doesn't want to deal with having to sort through it and break it down. He'll pay us more money just to get the competition blend.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, like the Big Green Egg guys like those extra large chunks.
Yes.
In their Big Green Eggs and stuff like that. So there is some value there, I suppose. I pretty much like to have a good mixture though, because I want to make sure and get I just like it to fit tighter and get more charcoal in my charcoal basket, charcoal chimney, whatever. If I'm going to do a longer burn, for instance, on the smoke slinger and such. But another thing about that Naked Whiz is one of the things that he does is he'll break down the bag and he'll take pictures with the little black and white measuring angle strips, and he'll tell you bag 1, and he'll break it down by the size and weight and dimensions of the pieces. How much percent of this bag was this size, how much was this and this, and they get a grade on that. Then he'll do bag number 2 and let you see for consistency purposes. It's really cool how deep that guy goes. Like I wouldn't sit there and sort that entire bag, but he does. He has for years. One of the things to note is that he did a review of Jealous Devil XL chunks. I think he did. I don't remember if it was 2014, but he did it twice. He did it in 2014, did it again 10 years later. And it's one of the highest rated charcoals in his database, both for consistency and sizing and grading, and also the how long it burns, how hot it burns, stuff like that. So he goes all the way in, tells you all the data behind it. It's really cool to see all that information. If you're really trying to do if it matters to you anyway, I guess.
I think that from the standpoint financially, it matters because playing with all this charcoal, constantly buying different brands, it gets costly. Some things are $12, when they're on sale. Others, like I'm saying, you get up there, they're $40, $50 a bag range without getting into the Japanese stuff. It gets costly. Or you brought up coconut. Coconut's relatively cheap. When you have to import it from some of the Southeast Asian areas, it costs. It goes way up there in cost.
Yeah, I think they use that coconut shell charcoal primarily in what's that with the water pipe? What do they call that? Hookah?
Hookah? Yep.
Hookah. Hooka.
Yep.
Maybe an H on there. I don't know. I want to add an H for some reason. So, hookah. But I tried that a couple of times. There was an old boy sending me some bags of that, and it just has no flavor. I was unimpressed.
Right.
It is a very clean, very hot, very long burning charcoal.
So it's probably good to create your coal bed with, if you're using an offset, and then to feed it with your splits after that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And I didn't really notice the ash, the difference in the ash, and I think Naked Wiz does that website does talk about the ash and what it was like and how much
Right.
based, and he does keep it consistent, between all of the different things. So another thing we need to talk about is like wood seasoning and wood storage and all of that. How do you have your wood stored right now?
So I have a area in the garage
I'm
that,
laughing because I've seen the stack.
yeah, I have an area in the garage because how do I put this? I want to make sure that wood always stays dry. I live in an area where there's 4 seasons. The first 3 are cold, friggin' cold, and oh my goodness, how cold is it going to get? Then we tend to get a spring, summer, and fall all in one season. Summer lasts for all of about 2 weeks. And then the fall comes right back in, getting ready for that 3 seasons of winter. So I keep my wood inside. It's in the garage, and it separates garage bay number 1 from garage bay number 2. And that's the oak and white oak that's stacked. And then in 5-gallon spackle buckets and in boxes, the wood guy was nice enough to provide to me some black cherry and some apple. So I have that in there as well to supplement for flavor. I don't use that only. It's not the only one I cook with. So the wood that I typically stay with is the oak, and then for flavor, for coloring, which we'll get into as well. There's a reason why I use cherry oak with pork. It is really for bringing out the natural colors as well as some of the flavors.
Yeah.
And then I have one more place that I have wood, and this is not something that I thought that we were going to bring up, but it's coming to mind, is wood pellets.
Yeah.
Bring that up because we have plenty of people out there that have transitioned from a charcoal cooker over to a pellet smoker so that they can go to bed at night. And then the evolution over to what we'll call the mother-in-law, and that is a full-blown offset smoker. And I call that the mother-in-law because you have to tend that every 45 minutes, stick a split in, and there's no time to spend time with the mother-in-law. You got to sit out back and baby that thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So but you've got yours stacked a certain way. That's kind of important to note too, your wood.
Yes. So I had no idea about this. I'm really new to this. This is really your field, knowing wood. So I have it what's called in a box stack. And the reason why we did a box stack was to make sure, since I'm indoors, that there's good airflow from whatever air is when we open up the garage doors, that the air is flowing through. If we were outside and I did just a straight stack, like a face cord straight stack, then in the natural elements of nature, the constant wind blowing through, the different temperatures, that would help. But here I'm in a climate controlled environment, keeping my wood fresh.
In the garage.
In the garage.
Yeah. Have the bugs hatched yet?
No, and they better not. That'll be
a big story about it.
Yeah, no, there's no bugs. There are some pieces that have some funky looking stuff on the outside. I don't know what it is. It looks like a growth. And all I do is take one piece of wood with another and smack them together or rub them, and everything comes off. I don't know if it's mold. I hope it's not mold. I don't
fungi.
Fungi.
It's just a good fungi.
Delicious.
Yeah.
Adds a little mushroom flavor to it if it's a fungus.
Shiitake. Yeah. So I like the way that the guy stacked your wood in there and showed you about that. But the key thing to it, a box stack.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering the pictures right, but it's 2 pieces this way and then 2 pieces the opposite way, with a hole in the middle, right, vertically through the whole stack. Is that right?
No, it was almost like the way that you showed me how to set up a like a logwood cabin. I believe it's like 2 or 3 pieces. So there's airflow between, but it's not hollow down the middle.
Okay, so he's got like 3 and then 3 and such. Yeah. That's a really great way to get a lot of air moving through your splits and stuff like that. And that a natural seasoning is great for wood. I prefer it that way. I think the reason is that am so stuck on it is because a lot of the times, so when you just like call the wood guy and buy wood, it's usually around here. You're talking to a guy that's cutting for firewood, right? That
Yeah.
guy's cutting a lot of dead wood, a lot of wood that hit the ground. It's standing timber maybe, but it's been standing dry for, dead for a little while. And you never the deader a tree is, the more moisture laden it is. So the like when you get into a split that's been dead for a while, or a log that's been laying on the ground for a while, if you look around the outside like half an inch, 1 inch, something like that, you'll start to see a spongy looking kind of grain there. And
Hmm.
that is dead wood, and it's really soft, and it's been absorbing moisture like crazy. And so it's really hard to get the moisture out of that wood naturally. So you wind up having to kiln dry it. Well, when you get into these operations that are cutting and shipping firewood, they have to comply with this thing called quarantine laws. So the bugs are in the wood, and so California, for instance, you can't ship wood into California most likely unless it's been through a mechanically kiln dried process that gets all of that moisture out to a point where it's acceptable to ship it into California. Missouri, for a long time, we had this thing called the emerald ash borer here in Missouri, and of course, it's all over the Midwest. But there was a time they didn't know a whole lot about it. But ash on my place, there's a lot of ash trees, and them things go around under the bark vertically in a spiral, and it cuts off the flow of the sap and stuff through that tree. It just kills the tree. And those things, they were trying to control those because they were invasive and all that. Well, I was talking to my forester buddy one day about it, and he said, had these quarantine laws that would prevent anyone from hauling any firewood outside of this specific region, like the Baker Man. If you ever saw the United States, there's a Baker Man there. We try to prevent that. And he said, and then someone found a way to track this bug, and that bug took off and flew over states. Like it flew from one state and just kept going and wound up like in Colorado from Missouri, and he was like, okay, quarantine laws aren't necessarily effective, but because the bug doesn't know when to stop. But anyway, a great effort. And so that's why they have to kiln dry the wood, but they also have to cut standing timber that's good. So green timber, for instance, when you harvest your white oak logs or post oak or whatever they're harvesting trees for in the timber industry, cherry, hickory, stuff like that, then those slabs, they usually use that for the firewood, and then they got to go take it, since it's green, and kiln dry it to get it down to a certain point. But they never really get it right. If you ever went and bought a box of wood at Academy, it's usually really wet in the middle of the wood. Have you ever seen that? Like when you throw a log on the fire and foam comes out the end of it?
That I've seen. Yep. It starts sizzling. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're heating that log up and all that sap is coming out of the end of the log. That's wet wood, is what that is. Yeah. I didn't know if you ever seen that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, some of the fruit woods that I have that I thought were ready to go are not. And it's not that the wood's smoldering, but you're correct. It begins to bubble at the end. It's sizzling. It's popping. It's crackling, and it won't light.
Takes a long time to light.
It takes a very long time. Whereas
Mhm.
when I take a nice piece of red oak or white oak and I stick that in, any of the little pieces that are sticking off the side of that wood instantly just burst into flames. And that wood loves to burn, and it burns hot and it burns clean.
Yeah.
That's the risk I take sometimes when I'm dealing with local people who are marketing wood to me as being food grade.
Yeah. So you ever notice, and this is not a stab at anyone in the medical profession, but have you ever noticed that you go to the doctor to get better, but then they go outside and take a smoke break? You ever notice that?
I've
You're
seen,
like, where the hell is he going with this?
yeah, or they come back in and you can smell it on their hands.
So that's me with my wood pile. So I leave my wood completely exposed to the outdoors in big
Okay.
stacks. I don't like I'm the guy that says don't do all this stuff, but then here I am doing it, you know. So I kind of have to laugh when I start talking about proper wood storage and stuff like that, you know, but ideally what Dave's doing is great. You know, keeping your wood stacked indoors, keeping it covered, keeping air moving between it is really important. If you're like me, you don't really want to do that because you just don't want to for some reason. And so you choose to do it in smaller bites. And so I have my big steel racks that had all my angle iron and stuff on them from the old shop where I was. And Aaron and I just converted those over to wood racks. And so now we've got a whole big stack of cherry on one side, whole big stack of hickory on another, and on the back side we're starting our post oak and other breeds stacks. And I do burn quite a bit of wood. You know, I cook a lot around here. So I wind up taking I wind up taking stacks of that wood and then further processing it ahead of time when I'm going to cook next. And then I just put it in I usually put it in my Avantco food warmer
Right.
and rock it for at 130 degrees overnight before the day I cook. That has proven to be very, very good for preheating logs. I know that most people are like, a food warmer? But what inspired me is Jeremy Yoder did a video where he put some splits in his Vivor warmer and booked it for 2 weeks, didn't come home. And he said, did this work? And he showed 2 week dried wood versus wood that's stacked outside. And by God, it worked great. And so I just started doing it, you know. I don't know. It works pretty good. As far as moisture content, I got no idea where the measurer should be. We've always said 8%, but I don't even know if it's achievable to hit 8%. You have any opinion on that? Have you heard any talk?
I've got objective evidence on that because I'm the
Okay.
guy that's got the wood meter who can take it and put it up against the wood and know just what the percentage of humidity is. So when you get really low, like I was saying with some of the wood that I have, it bursts into flames. You need
Yeah.
a certain amount of humidity in there in order to have that smoky wood. It's got to be there. What's the word I'm looking for? You need it to be inefficient. You don't want the wood burning that clean, that hot.
Yeah.
So the whole idea here with an offset smoker is to be inefficient for the hot air to dissipate. That's why we don't use insulated fire chambers. That's why we don't use insulated cook chambers. That's such a silly thing to do when you're building, to decide you're going to go fully insulated because you feel that you live in the tundra. It's not. Same thing here with wood that I have, old wood that I can put the wood meter up to, and it registers numbers like 5%. That's not good. That's bad because it's great in the beginning to just get that coal bed if all I want to do is build a coal bed that way. But when I'm looking for, I'm going to go back, instead of with an offset, I'm going to bring that over to our traditional pit barbecue, our smoke slinger. If I'm putting 2 wood splits into the side of my charcoal pan and then filling the middle of the charcoal pan with my lump charcoal, I want those wood splits not to just burst into flames, but little by little, I want them to turn orange, get the coal kind of going with that, create the heat, but also give me the flavor, the same way that people do when they add wood chunks. So there's an acceptable level. Then there's a level that, like we were talking about, you have sap in there and it's just sizzling and it's popping and it's not going to light. And then you've got that ideal. I think about 12 to 13%, maybe 12 to 15% is about the ideal range to be inefficient when you're burning, but efficient when it comes to flavor profiles and it comes to the amount of time that log is going to burn.
Yep.
Could you imagine if you're burning this 5% humidity on an offset? So rather than every 40 minutes or so, now you're in there every 10 to 12 minutes having to throw a log in. How truly, that's really inefficient. And you're burning super clean, but it's inefficient
Super
from
hot.
the standpoint that you can never walk away. You're always going to be on top of this thing, tending it.
Yeah, trying to tone it down. You got
Right.
to shut dampers and all kinds. Yeah, I have definitely been in that situation. One other tip, real quick, about kiln, about preheating your logs and stuff like that, is we have started. I actually saw a complete stranger post on Facebook today. He had 4 briskets in one side of his like big offset smoker, big propane tank smoker. On the firebox end, he had like a big stack of wood in there. So I've literally started like keeping my wood, since I keep it outside. I've literally started like preheating logs inside the cook chamber before I'm ready to stack them on the in the firebox or whatever I'm going to do. But another thing you can do is, keep your wood there on the cooking grate if you're not using it, or move that wood over on top of the firebox is a great way. If you're
Right.
cooking on a smoke slinger and you only got a fire in one drawer, keep your wood in the other drawer, and it's like baking it in an oven or whatever. I've actually told people, use your pellet grill to preheat your wood so that you can put it on your offset.
That's that's a really good idea. Um, I've
The
got
smoked wood. It
I've
should
got
be more.
3 pellet cookers here. So the idea that you're coming up with is wonderful because I can put the wood on at night
Yeah.
and preheat it on the pellet cookers. Like, for example, a vertical pellet cabinet is a great place to be able to store the wood because I don't have one level. I've got multiple
Mhm.
levels of wood that I can have slowly, very low and slow, getting the humidity out of, smoking the wood, maybe even infusing a little bit of that flavor right back into it, and then using it the next day for that for on my offset.
Mhm. Looks like you got some people in the chat there that's trying to get your attention there, bro.
I see. I'll need your number for the giveaway. Oh boy, they're
You
looking
won
for my.
something?
I maybe I don't know.
That's awesome.
It could be. I'm gonna have to respond to somebody.
Well, while you're doing
Probably.
that, I'm going to give some shout outs
Go
while you're
ahead.
texting him. Let's get on in here. Let's see. Hojo in the house. Glad you're here, buddy. Carlton's cooking. He's on Team Smokeslinger there. Good to see you. Let's see. Richard Warren, welcome aboard. He's listening in. Let's see. Jonathan Matthews, glad you're here, man. We were talking about filet and saffrole. Let's see. Hojo says he likes to use black walnut in small doses. I'd like to hear more about that. Maybe at one of our our meetups, maybe we can drag a chunk of walnut along. Some of us can, and we can kind of play with that, see what that does. By the way, don't forget, head on over to, and don't be afraid, just type it in exactly like it says on the screen there if you're watching on the replay. Naked Wiz, NakedWhiz.com. Takes you to the Naked Wiz homepage where you can decide if you really want to go in there and learn about charcoal or not. It's good stuff. Let's see. Looks like you gave Jonathan a quote, bro.
I did. I
Yeah,
did.
yep. David Suss wants to know, or maybe it's Beth, I don't know, but I bet it's David that wants to know about that 100 pounds plus free post oak wood splits that he wound up with. He's a lumberjack ready to roll. Hojo likes B&B. That's what he's saying. Let's see here. Eric, my bro, canned meats. What's up, brother? Chris Farrell wants to know, what's the best wood to cook with? What do you think, Dave?
So, I again, only here's a tough one. I've now had the experience of cooking full cooks with post oak, full cooks with pecan, full cooks with the with the oak that's closest to me. And I'm biased because I have such a large quantity of this white oak and red oak that I'm going to say that's what it is. If there was a way, the same way when we were in Florida, that they kind of brought us an entire pallet. I don't know what you call that, what that was, or even how I would get that shipped to me.
Mm-hmm.
but we had an entire pallet of the post oak that, of
Mhm.
course, David Suss was able to take 100 pounds of it back in his truck. And we also had the pecan wood. I didn't cook on the pecan there, but how do people go about getting, say, these woods that aren't native to their areas? How do you order that pallet of wood and get that delivered?
That's a great question. So, well, first to answer Chris's question, in my opinion, the superior wood is a blend of cherry and hickory, just because I like it so much. But I will take post oak any day.
Yeah.
And he can get plenty of that where he's at down in Texas. So, but as far as that goes, there are companies. One of them that pops to mind instantly is Chief Firewood down in Texas. They're one of the large suppliers. And yeah, those companies do ship you a pallet of wood. They stack a 30 by 40 pallet up, and they do the whole box stacking, I believe, like you're talking, but it's tight. It's not got air in it. And then they have a pallet wrapper that they just completely wrap that skid with the shrink wrap. And then when you get it, it's just a pallet of wood. It's about 2,000 pounds or something worth of wood, probably. Just guessing, because a standard weight on a full size skid is between 1,500 and 2,000 pounds.
Wow.
So, but yeah, that's the best way to do it. You're going to get it on freight, is how it'll come to you. Not sure what the freight class is or the cost of the freight, but you can get it like that all day long. There was a guy, Bert, out in Fruita, Colorado, but I found out he retired. So I don't know what's going on in Colorado now. California has a big firewood supply company. Not really sure about the East Coast, but I do know there's some around New York and Virginia that do it. I can't remember best way to do it. I know there's a few in Florida, especially around Miami, because that's where we got the wood, was from a local guy in Miami down there when we were at that event. So,
Okay.
yeah, pallets of cooking wood. Now it's going to be mechanically kiln dried, so you might still be a little wet. You might cook with it, and if you see foam coming out the end grain, that's how you know it's still wet.
Right.
Another shout out here, Daddy Dutch. What's up, brother? Appreciate you. So David's asking about wood, about Florida weather with wood. This time of year, his outside wood is dry? Question mark. And it'll only get so dry with nature, and then at that point we start absorbing based on the humidity. Do you agree with that, Dave?
I do. And I was thinking that with him in Florida, maybe putting a tarp over the top, but then you
Mhm.
could end up with that greenhouse effect that as the humidity is trying to escape from the wood, you're
Yeah,
capturing it right
trap.
back inside. Yeah. So
Mhm.
that's a tough one, since at this time of year, Florida isn't getting pummeled with those hurricanes, but they do have high humidity. So how do you pull the humidity out of the wood when you're in a climate that's always, so abrasive with the
Humid.
humidity?
Yeah, I don't know that you can. I think you just come to equilibrium with whatever the vapor pressure is in your area, basically with humidity,
Right.
and then just preheat at that point. I don't think you're ever going to over dry wood if it's stored in ambient. I think you have to actually, to get what was your number, Dave? 12% or something.
I think 12 to 15% is ideal.
Yeah, I think if you're going to try to get it lower than that, you have to use like a dehumidifier, some kind of kiln. You have to heat it up. You got to do something to cook the moisture out of it to get below that, I believe.
With the
That's a good.
pizza oven, what we used to do, not Florida, but you brought up New York. What we would do is the wood that's actually in the pizza oven that's used for heating it, that's the fire, that's one thing. But we would do similar to what you were mentioning earlier about putting the wood into the firebox to the side. We would put a couple of pieces of wood stacked right at the mouth of the pizza oven and give that the opportunity to dry out before then feeding that wood repetitively back into the pizza oven, and to keep that 1,000 degrees going the entire time.
Yeah, good stuff there. Hey, we got to talk about charcoal, man, before we
Oh
run out
yeah.
of time here. Let's see. Anybody else? You gave your number. Daniel Perez, he says, no good wood supplier in West Palm Beach. But that's where we were, isn't it?
That is, but you mentioned the wood had come up from Miami. So that's what he needs, is that the guy who's 45 minutes to an hour away to bring him that wood.
Talk to Jeff Budd at Apocalypse Barbecue. He was my backup plan in case our other wood supplier fell through. I know he buys regularly from a good guy down there, Hickory and Oak. So there you go. Apocalypse Barbecue. What's up, Trumpet? How you doing, buddy? Something about Hojo wants to know if Trumpet's getting the full size of the mini smoke slinger.
Well, that's because Trumpet was saying, if you go back one comment, the good thing about the smoke slinger in being in a hurricane.
Oh, well, I don't know. That's a good point. Yeah.
But then, based upon his portly size, he would need a full-size smoke slinger.
That's what he says right there, a full-size smoke slinger. Okay, so getting into charcoal, that's hilarious. Drop your comments down in there, and maybe if we get done fast enough, we'll run through some more. So as far as charcoal goes, what is your preferred way to store it? You got it in the garage, of course.
I have it in 2 places. No, I have it in 3 places because I'm a sicko. So there's a certain amount that's in the garage. There's another amount that's in the basement. And then there's another amount that I have, small amount that I have not too far from another area that I do some grilling at. So there's 3 different locations of charcoal and pellets that I have throughout the house.
Yeah. So for me, I generally only have 1 or 2 bags at a time. I normally don't just stock up on charcoal. I haven't found it to be fiscally worth it in my area to do that because charcoal is everywhere.
Right.
So I usually just run whatever Academy brung kind of deal. I try to stay in the Fogo, Jealous Devil realm a little bit. I will get a bag of B&B here and there if I'm fiending and they're out in that's another thing to think about is those guys handle that stuff like it's sacks of feed. They don't care what it is. It's not, right. They're not treating it like eggs, and so they're beating the crap out of those bags. And so when you go to Academy and you see a bag that's been packing taped together, then it's likely been sat on, stood on, jumped on, thrown across the room, dropped off the truck, who knows what. And so it's probably going to be full of fines at that point. And so you're not necessarily getting the best product. So, kind of keep that in mind. And I like to pick through. Whereas if you buy a pallet of wood or a split pallet or something like that, you probably have a little more control over the quality of what you're getting, I would assume. So that might be a reason to do it. But for me, I just store it. I got a closet in my garage that I keep, like those dunnage up off the ground so right. I can set it up on there. I keep the bags. I usually don't, if I open a bag, I use it. But if I do have a little left over, I try to roll the bag up and keep it a little bit tight,
Right.
But charcoal don't last very long around here. So, because I cook so much and I use charcoal to start everything. So that's kind of my deal on that.
The reason why I have so much is that when there's a sale, I'll take a large quantity of it. And it's not that there's a big savings when you look at the $2.50. It's when you're taking such a quantity that $2.50 is exponential. So, I would love to see the Jealous Devil on sale more often. It's not, but when it is, I'll load up on the chunks, the extra large pillow type of briquettes. I have those. And usually that's coming from places like a Walmart or a Home Depot or, Sam's Club, Ace Hardware, things that are relative to the Northeast region. We don't have an Academy. Our Academy would be the equivalent of Dick's Sporting Goods.
I forgot you don't have Academies out there.
No, we don't have that. And we don't have a Menards. We don't have a local HEB. The most local HEB to me is getting on a plane and flying to Texas. That's about as local
Me
as it
too.
gets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to go with what's available. And I'll tell you, this blew my mind. I'm going to bring this up because at the last meetup that we had, I was charged with going into Walmart to pick up charcoal. And
I
it blew
remember.
my mind. I have more variety of brands of charcoal in the Walmarts by me than they did in Texas. Like there was 2 brands. That was it. There was the Walmart brand, or there was something
Royal
else.
Oak.
Royal Oak. That was it. And B&B is made in Texas. How is
Yeah.
that not available at Walmart? Why isn't
Yeah.
Walmart by me carrying a lifetime supply, pallets upon pallets of this stuff? But
Yeah.
local to Texas, it's not there.
I have no idea why that would be, but you're
Yeah.
right. It's very regional, it seems, based on warehouses and stuff, probably.
Sure.
And whoever's greasing whoever's pocket, maybe. That might be part of it. But
The Blue Hog stuff is great. Storing that is not a problem because when I open up the bag, I use the entire bag. But some of the other ones, when we get into the size of the bags, when you get into 30-pound bags, restaurant style bags, those I have to store.
yeah.
I know that if I really push it, I can take the smoke slinger and fill up both of those charcoal pans with 15 pounds to 20 pounds easily. But I've got to be doing a pretty long cook if I'm going to use all that charcoal.
Yeah, for sure. So we got a good comment here about purchasing wood, a couple of them here.
Okay.
Where was it here? Because that's our next part of it. Sorry. It's taking me a while to pull it up. Wait a minute. We got to do this first.
Okay.
Chris wants to know, which type of charcoal do you recommend, lump or the standard charcoal? I prefer lump, and I prefer big lump. What do you like the best?
I'm with lump and char logs, which is different than the standard charcoal. You know what? That's actually a trick question. It is standard charcoal. All it is formed into a cylinder, and then they put a hole down the middle. So it's the same thing as your briquettes, whereas your lump charcoal is actual wood. So
it's actually called extruded charcoal. It's like squeezed out of the putty Play-Doh machine.
Yes, right.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. Yeah. Couple wood suppliers. David says he buys from Cutting Edge Firewood in Georgia. If that makes any sense. Don't have a number for them. They always have sales and ship for free.
Oh, I'll take some free shipping on that.
Heck yeah, dude. And then Carlton says he thinks Chief will also give you a wood rack for the wood. And I think that's true. They have some pretty dang cool looking cages.
Yeah.
Not sure I'm sure there's a deposit on that cage, or you buy it, I guess, but it's pretty cool. They do a good job, especially if you're in Texas. It's totally worth it. So, but as far as wood goes, Chief is the one that I've heard the most good things about. If you don't want to order wood by the pallet or something like that, tell us how you found your wood guide, Dave.
So I was on Facebook Marketplace looking for wood, and just about everybody around me is selling firewood. And I came across someone who said that he had food grade wood for the pizza oven. So I said, okay, that's what I'm looking for. Pizza oven wood would be great. We got to talking, and we had quite a bit in common, including when it came to the barbecue side. So miraculously, what should have been a very small amount, conservative amount, nothing that my wife would have a fit about, quantity of wood, turned into an entire wall. Because the more we talked, and the more that we were just doing our thing, the more wood got stacked. So by the time we were done, he had unloaded an entire pickup truck full, plus whatever he had in his trailer.
Oh yeah.
And then a month and a half, 2 months goes by, and he says, "Hey, did you go through the wood? I have some more wood for you. Do you mind if I stop by with some cherry and some apple wood?" Yeah, come on by, no problem.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
you guys have orchards out there, don't you? around you?
So because of the farming in New Jersey,
Uh-huh.
which is I can throw a stone and hit it right across the Delaware River. Jersey is known for their apple orchards. Pennsylvania has their apple orchards, and then we have other fruit trees like you have peach trees.
Uh-huh.
I haven't found anybody selling peach wood. I'd
Yeah.
like to find out what that tastes like, but it's mostly getting um, into varieties of apples, varieties of cherries. What else do we grow out here? Well, we have a lot. We have quite a few vineyards as well. Getting back to
Uh-huh.
that vine that you were talking
Grape
about, but I don't
wood.
know if I'd want to cook with. I don't know if I want to cook with a vine.
It's kind of sappy. It
Yeah,
has a nice soot that it provides,
I don't know.
in my opinion, unless it's really hot. So as far as fruit wood goes, I forgot I do have some peach, not a lot, but I have some peach here, and we burned it at the Royal a few years ago for open fire stuff, and it's actually very pleasant. I liked it a lot. Doesn't burn very hot. It's not as hot as post oak, but I did actually like it. So if you're down in Georgia, because I know that's like the Georgia peach, you could probably get quite a bit of it if you try hard. Um, but yeah, anyway.
Does that
Well, that
affect
kind
the
of
flavor of when you're cooking with it? Does
uh-huh.
it help to infuse any flavors? And if so, is there one type of protein over another that you would suggest using that with?
So pork for sure.
Okay,
Like you're gonna it's not gonna be like a penetrating flavor like a lot of those sweet woods. It's not
right.
on cold smoking, yes. Like for applewood smoked bacon, stuff like that. But when you get into like doing a brisket or something like that, a lot of it's going to be pretty shallow. It's not going to really penetrate deep, like a oak wood, smoke wood,
Right.
which is, I guess, I guess Texas has a boatload of oak down there also,
Yep.
but and it's readily available everywhere, and it's pretty in the middle. It's pretty mild, so that's why they use it so much. But it does seem that like oak and hickory and that kind of thing does seem to penetrate a little better, which we takes us, we're talking about the flavoring side of it now. Now we're talking about like smoke rings and stuff like that. And the smoke ring, you can produce that in an oven. Largely it's a chemical reaction, but smoke has an effect on that chemical reaction that makes it darker, more prevalent, a little bit deeper. And if you ever notice, it's usually only about, a quarter to a half of an inch max. Half inch is huge, down into the surface of whatever you're cooking. Um, but that's mostly the salt and stuff like that and the chemical reaction that's being sucked into the meat, which does bring some of that flavor in, I suppose.
Right.
I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
So when it comes to selecting woods for flavor and for color, I like that you brought up pork. With that, I'll use a cherry wood and I'll even use apple wood. And you'll hear a
Hmm.
lot of people when it comes to applewood that, when they're thinking of pork, they're thinking of pork belly. They're making bacon that has an applewood smoke. It does add what I find is a little bit of sweetness. I can't comment on texture. I don't know if it does anything with texture. When
Hmm.
I'm using cherry wood, it does give that beautiful red mahogany smoke ring on the inside, and that's why I use
Hmm.
that specifically for the color.
Yeah.
But I don't really know necessarily if one wood over another does something significant. They all add like a little bit of subtlety. And I
Hmm.
noticed there's another wood here. We haven't touched upon it yet. Hojo brought it up, and that was the mesquite and hickory woods, things like that. Uh, Obviously, mesquite Texas, you think of that, or you think of potato chips that have a mesquite barbecue flavor,
Yeah.
right? That's mesquite.
Hmm.
In the times that I've gotten that, again, we're going back to big box stores. We're talking about it comes in a sack, or it comes in a box as chunks. I've played around with that. It does add a nice little finish to it. It's not something that I'm going to want to do a heavy supplementation. It's
Hmm.
usually towards the not the very beginning of the cook, but still in that beginning phase where the temperature of the meat hasn't hit 150. And I don't know if that's a rumor, but when you get
Hmm.
past a certain level, the meat stops absorbing that smoke. So I'll put it in as the meat's kind of getting closer to that, like that 85 to 100-degree range,
Mhm.
and allow it to get a little of the color and a little of the flavor. But after that, that's kind of it. I don't want to go too heavy with that. I'm just not a big fan of hickory and mesquite flavor. I don't know.
Mhm.
That's me.
You
Maybe
just
there's
ain't
other
had it
people that are
cooked
eating
right.
my house wondering where that flavor is.
You know, here, whenever somebody says they're not a fan of X,
Yeah.
we always say, "Well, you just ain't had it cooked right."
Yeah, I must not have. I must not know what I'm doing with hickory and mesquite.
I'm just kidding. But I do know Mr. Voigt, Aaron, my friend here in town. If you don't know who he is, follow him on social media at Mr. VOIGT. Anyway, great guy. And he brought me a big pile of mesquite when he moved up. He actually moved here from Arizona, and that he cooks basically 100% with mesquite,
Okay.
with a lot of his food. And I've had some of his food. It's really great. He's a phenomenal cook. I think there's a lot of process with it. Like you want to make sure it's not wet, number one, and then you want to be burning a really good coal bed so that you get a really clean fire. Preheat your wood for sure. It'll make it a little milder, but it's best on like Southwest kind of tacos. Like if you're making a taco thing, mesquite all the way. I'm there. Maybe a
Okay.
mesquite and oak blend, in my opinion. If you're doing Argentina cooking, post oak first, then mesquite. Because you got to have that BTU content
Right.
to go. Santa Maria style cooking, they use a lot of mesquite, that kind of stuff. Yeah, here Hojo said Ed from the meetup. That's brother Ed Sims. We had a good time with Ed. He cooks with exclusively with mesquite also. So, but hickory on the other hand, that's why a lot of people blend it with something like oak or cherry, apple, something to kind of cut it back a little bit. But usually, when you have bad food that was smoked on hickory, it's because it was too wet when they cooked with it,
Right.
typically. Which is another issue with red oak. Red oak naturally has a lot of water in it. Like
Okay.
it's very wet wood typically, you know.
You know what I tell people sometimes when they don't know much about wood, or they think they know everything. Usually it's the ones that think they know everything.
Yeah.
They'll ask, what wood do you use? What tricked out wood? And I like to tell them that I use, if not a pellet, then the wood itself, Douglas fir. I find that Douglas fir not only heats the house, it's wonderful. Either it's lignettes or barefoot pellets, but it's also cost effective. It's wonderful stuff, especially right after Christmas. I can get an unbelievable amount of Douglas fir right on the curb.
Yeah. Another one around here is hedge. If you ever cooked with that, that's like Osage orange, we call it.
Uh-huh.
It's very crackly, very poppy, very hot wood. It's very intense wood to cook with. But I've heard of guys that just want to use that primarily around here. Dogwood. Have you ever heard of people using dogwood?
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard of
Yeah.
people using that. But there's woods that we forget about too that we don't have around as much. Beech, alder. I have personally cooked with ash. It's not like a pleasant flavor. It's more of just a normal flavor. So
Right.
there's that. Um, but anyway, talk about some pairings here. We got Chris. He's asking. You pulled him up a second ago. What
Oh
would you
yeah.
cook with applewood?
Would I cook with applewood? Of course I cook with applewood. I love cooking with applewood. I just need some of this applewood that I have to dry out a little bit more because I'm getting
Mhm.
that sizzling. I'm getting that foam at the end. But I love
Yeah,
cooking with applewood. Applewood I think goes great not only with pork and chicken, but also with beef. It goes great with lamb.
yeah.
It's very universal. Cherry wood,
Mhm.
on the other hand, uh, I'm using it for color. I'm not really using that for flavor. And with certain meats, I don't know if I want everything as dark as I would get when I'm looking at certain cuts of pork. If I'm doing pork loin, pork butts, bacon, applewood, cherry wood, all that loaded up. With beef, not so much. lamb already has that greasy, like kind of texture to it. So apple wood, I think, goes really well. It helps with the rosemary, the garlic, and the olive oil, salt and pepper that I have on there as well. It's a complementary wood.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Champions blend, if you ever buy pellets that say Champions blend on them, typically it's cherry, hickory, and pecan is what's in there. And I think it's a third in there, but you can mess with that blend a little bit if you're on a stick burner. Pecan and apple are very similar as far as like the flavor you'll get. It is going to be a nice sweet flavor. I cooked with a lot of pecan in my time. As far as a major difference in it compared to apple, I can't really tell, for the result of my food. I never really noticed, but yeah, it's definitely good. I think beef works best in my opinion, just because we've all had it so much with oak. But I do use hickory and cherry with beef here and there. I've had people say, "My God, what did you do to that thing?"
Right.
Because they liked it, But that's mostly just because that's what I've got the most of. I'm trying not to cut into my special woods too deep, if I'm
So
doing a catering gig.
hickory makes sense, with beef. It
Yeah.
makes sense not just with the brisket. Whenever we think meats, it always comes back to Central Texas. It comes back to brisket. But let tri-tip, for example. I think that mesquite would go, or hickory would go great with mesquite. I'm not against using them. I think that certain items are a moderation, while others are a good source of heat.
Yeah. So speaking of heat, we've got the heat content of the different woods. So the fruit woods are typically going to be not as intense of heat, whereas you get up into like mesquite, post oak, blackjack oak, those kind of woods, they're going to be on the hotter end of it with your heat content. So the hotter end of the woods we're going to be using for open fire, Santa Maria style cooking, Argentina style cooking, that kind of thing. Making embers. If you're going to cook with embers, that's a great way to do it. I don't know what they use like in South Carolina and stuff for that. If they're using pecan or oak or whatever, cherry, hickory. Not really sure what they're using for making embers down there.
Right.
Do you know?
I don't. Now you gave me a great topic to have to look into.
Yeah.
Because with when we're playing with the burn barrel, I'd love to be able to use the right wood to create the right coals for the next time I'm doing one of those live fire cooks, one of those hog cooks or whatever, like an alligator that I know is coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to do that at some point. So the thing I think that is important about making embers for cooking in a situation like that is you need not to rub and scrape the bark off. I think it needs to be broken off. I could be wrong about that, and it's something I need to figure out. But like throwing a log up in the top and it hitting and breaking up, like in a bracero or brazos, whatever it's called, on the side of a Santa Maria or Argentina grill, you see those embers falling down. I noticed that when we're burning in a burn barrel, I almost have to take, like, I always keep a 4-prong like tater fork, we always called it, but it's the one with the 90. I always take that and I scrape the bottom and try to break those up, and it makes finer embers. And so I don't think they last as long, or you maybe you don't get enough BTU content out of it. Whereas if the big embers come down for like doing a whole hog cook, maybe that's the trick. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
what we were doing was very traditional when we were hitting it with the shovel to, as they're big pieces of wood, and large chunks would fall towards the bottom. By the way, that Myron mixing class, I sent you over that information. It's open right now. We can get our seats, and that would be a great follow-up to this conversation we're having right now after we get through that course. And now we're certified experts in the field of making live coal and doing that traditional pit barbecue.
Man, that's a lot of work.
That's what
Yeah,
Red Bull and caffeine is for. Coffee, espresso, Red Bull. The only way we're getting through it.
Yeah, that's about it. That's about the only thing you can do.
All right.
So as far as like given the opportunity to cook, well, let's just talk about a smoke slinger because that's the thing that comes to my mind first.
Right.
Are you going to fire up with primarily charcoal or primarily wood or a blend? What's your favorite way with this? All these things we've been talking about.
What I did tonight, because I was using the planches for making our Tuesday night dinner. With that, I decided that I wanted like really intense heat. So instead of just going with charcoal and putting the pans right underneath the planches, I did what we kind of experimented and figured out. I put 2 splits along the side, and then I filled the middle with the char logs, and then just lit the char logs. And as those burnt, they began to expand outwards to the wood. When that wood caught, I think I was at a point where I might need to replace my thermostats because it got
it got hot.
We went past 500 on both thermostats, and I know why. It's because that 4-inch stem that comes out was in just the right place, that as soon as the log caught, it was directly right there, like maybe right at the tip, maybe 1/4 of an inch in, where it touched that, and those dials were spinning.
Yeah, I've never seen one go bad from that, by the way.
All right, I hope not. I hope
they should be fine. But yeah, I'm doing the kind of the same thing. I think with the smoke slinger, it's super convenient to have a bed of coal, like charcoal in the middle, have a split on the side or one on each side or something like that. You get about a 2-hour run off that split. But then if I'm going to a stick burner, I'm going to start with a little, like a couple handfuls of charcoal in the bottom of the stick burner, whether it's the Liberty 94 or Bingo, my big pit. I'm going to start with just a little bit of charcoal, get that lit, throw splits on top, might hit it again with some kind of a torch or something and get it really going. And but the life's blood of that thing is that wood becoming charcoal and keeping that BTU consistent, that BTU capacity on there consistent. As far as splits go, the size, what's your go-to right now as far as the length and diameter?
12 to 14 inches in length and 2.5 to 3 inches in diameter.
Yeah, that's what I do, 2.5 diameter. So, and sometimes I like a 10-inch split, sometimes I like closer to a 14. And then on my big pits, of course, I go 16-inch or 18-inch splits. The big thing is that I think that if you use too big of a split, then you could overfuel whenever that split becomes charcoal. But then the other thing is that if you if you put too big a split on there, it's going to take longer for that thing to light.
Right,
is what it's going to do. And we just don't want to do that.
Looks like Stephen Manis just provided the solution to the Carolina cook and making making our own coals. Look at this. He says in South Carolina we use white oak, hickory, red oak, pecan in the burn barrel.
Oh, cool. Okay.
We just saved ourselves an entire trip to Georgia with Myron Mick. He just saved us thousands.
We're still gonna go.
Of course we're going.
I've had some good times hanging out with them boys. So yeah. But anyway, yeah. Let's see. This is for you right here, Dave, while we're wrapping up. Chris wants to know, how would you cook breakfast on the smoke slinger? Let's roll.
Excellent question. So I use one side, since I have the full-size smoke slinger, and whether you have the full size or the mini, there's the availability now of the 2-piece split plancha. The only difference is the size. Instead of taking up roughly 44 inches on a 48-inch cooker, I'd rather you're taking 44 inches on a 48-inch cooker. On the smaller one, because it's 24 by 30, you're probably more in the 26-inch range, and each one's about 13 inches. I'm just going offhand because there's a little extra room on each side so that you can close the cover. So getting back to it, I'll use one side with a plancha, take my charcoal basket, raise it up so that it's on my tuning plates, and then right above it is my plancha, so it gets direct heat. Then on the other side, I'll use that for whatever different breakfast meats I'm cooking. So on the plancha, I can do my bacon, my eggs, my pancakes. Then on the other side, I'm able to do other items. So if I wanted to do, say, for example, the large sausage links, I could do that on the flat top if I chose to. It'll cook just the same, just like if you were in a diner and they do the side order cooks on their cooktop. I choose to go with some direct heat that's in my charcoal pan that's in the rails where it's supposed to be. It's right there in my cook chamber, and any other meats and things that I'm making, or if I'm starting early on a late afternoon to early dinner cook, then I'm able to do two things at the same time. But back to breakfast, I do that right there on one side of the plancha.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's what I haven't done it yet. I got the fixin' twos. The only breakfasts I've cooked on the smoke slinger is with the planchas.
Right.
And every time it's been my own concoction we call dirty eggs, but it's basically, breakfast tacos. So however you want to make them, there's no wrong answers. What I really like about the planchas, though, is that you do get a couple of different heat zones depending on how you set it up. That plate, you can get a little bit cooler ring around the outside and a hotter zone in the middle if you want. Or if you raise that charcoal basket up to the top, you can get it really super even. And what I really like is you can close the lid on that cooker and it's insulated. You're going to get a super ton of radiant heat just rolling back down on those top of those planchas. Which I guess if you're going to quick sear steak, like the old flat iron steak in a skillet kind of routine, you could do that in there too.
That's right.
For steak and eggs. So
Oh,
there
yeah.
you go.
Hojo asked a question here that's unique, and I did do this. So he asked, have I ever done an entire long cook on the smoke sling with just wood? The answer is yes. And this is how that came to be. I initially had started off with lump charcoal, and because the cook was going for such a long time, and every so often I would still feed it with a split of wood, I just got to the point where I'm like, yeah, I don't feel like pulling the charcoal pan out and then dumping in a chimney full of lit lump charcoal. So I'll just keep feeding it wood. It was no problem. It was the same way as if I was using an offset. But I felt that the wood, for whatever reason, lasted longer in the smoke slinger than it did when I was using it on an offset.
Yep,
and another
I
unique
agree.
property that we learned is every large piece of meat that you put on the smoke slinger is cooked in 8 hours.
I don't know what it is. It's such a weird thing.
Yeah. So if for someone who's out there right now who's trying to say, well, do I want to go with a traditional offset or do I want to go with this pit barbecue? If you're looking for the most universal cooker that also allows you to go to bed or take a nap, since it'll cook for 4 to 5 hours on its own just with the charcoal, or you're also looking to be able to get dinner done a reasonable amount of time, that's where that smoke slinger comes into play. And yes, you can use it straight with wood or charcoal or both. It's I think the word they use is it's a flex fuel.
Yeah, it is weird. The whole hog.
Yep.
My briskets, your shoulders, the vacío.
Oh yeah.
Anything we cooked. Actually, did we do the vacío? I think we did. I can't remember what we did anymore. It's been so while. We have to go back and listen to the last episode.
The vacío we did on the Liberty. Okay. However, we took a rack of beef ribs, cut it in half.
That's right.
Did
That's
half
what it was.
on the smoke slinger, and we did half on the Liberty 94. And the ones in the smoke slinger were done in record time and had the same consistency, flavor, and texture as the low and slow offset.
Yeah, it is weird. It is because of that heat source being closer to under with the tuning plates, and then the ability to run offset, direct, whatever you want to do. It's just it actually gets the same result in a shorter amount of time. Not trying to not sell offsets here. I'm just being honest with you. It's pretty cool. Of course, I'm an offset guy. I mean, I've been cooking on offsets for a really dang long time, and I've made some great food in my personal opinion. I liked it every time. But if you're coming from an offset to a smoke slinger direct heat cooker, I do believe you would be happy with that.
Oh yeah.
You know, especially if you're coming from a WSM and going to a smoke slinger. It's just like it's the middle ground. It's like such a great deal. So anyway, right on, man. Well, hey, appreciate you hanging out with me tonight. Talking
always a
about
good
wood,
time.
charcoal, and stuff. Yeah. Anything else you want to add before we close her down?
Well, I know that Dustin El Presidente is planning upon doing his second of April event.
Oh,
So stay
I think
tuned
it's
for that.
second weekend.
Second weekend, right?
Second
Second weekend,
Saturday.
second Saturday. The first Monday in Canton is the flea market, and the second Saturday is Smoke Slinger Fest. It's our meetup.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for those of you that are following in the Facebook group. I'm sure he'll be posting that pretty soon. He also just did some stuff with the Canton, Texas Facebook group, where I'm sure you'll see some of the information coming out there locally. I see that there's that Chris Ferrara that's in here. I'm wondering if this is the same Chris Ferrara from Long Island who does events over at the VA in the summertime. If so, I'll be bringing the toys, and I'll be there at the VA this summer, helping out and giving back to our veterans. That's what we do. We help those that have served the country and helped us. So when you give, you get back in life, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to give back.
Cool, man. Yep. Well, right on, buddy. Well, got a YouTube video dropping tomorrow, by the way, for you guys that are watching, about how to clean your smoke slinger. I forgot about that. That'll be up tomorrow. And yep, I've had a good time, and I appreciate all you guys for watching. And we'll be back here next week, next Monday night at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll have another edition of the BBQ Nerds Podcast. By the way, you can catch it on iTunes when I cut it up and take all the ums and uhs out and make it a little more digestible. So appreciate you guys. Have a great one.